My guest this week is David Betts, who is Professor of War in the Modern World at King's College London. He's also a Senior Fellow of the Foreign Policy Research Institute. He's the author of 4 books, the most recent of which is The Guarded Age, and he's advised governments and the military. Very impressive intro there, David. Thank you very much for joining us. I wanted to talk to you, and that's going to be the main subject of our talk, about civil war in particular. Now, basically, it's one of those issues, it seems to me, that people are very, very loath to discuss because somehow discussing it makes it real, you know? And there is this fear all the time that one is making into reality something which seems to be unthinkable. In your writing, I mean, and I've watched some of the other things you've done, you very clearly set out the kind of various stages. I know that you have indeed said that there are different kind of theories about starting of a civil war, but the one that you came down on, or rather the one that you used, was actually Chairman Mao's, was it not? And I wonder whether you could go through those stages with us. They're quite simple 3 stages, aren't there? And at what stage do you think we might be at the moment, if any?
I used the Chairman Mao's model because it is the most common model of insurgency. So if you're in a class, a university class on insurgency, or you're studying it in a military staff college or something like that, you'll hear you hear reference to something called classical insurgency. Essentially, what they're referring to is the Maoist model, and it's very simple. It has 3 phases. The first phase is usually described as the defensive phase, or phase 1 is the defensive phase. And it's defenses from the perspective of the insurgent actor. During this phase 1, what the insurgent is doing is primarily political organization, proselytization, propaganda activities. It is getting its house in order. It is building its conscience community, which is just an academic word for people who listen to it. Or the people whom it is trying to energize, to mobilize. So it's building up a structure. It's working out its narratives. It's doing all these sorts of things. In phase 1, the insurgent is usually not very physically active. There might be a handful of pinprick attacks here and there. In order to obtain weapons or materials or something like that. Oftentimes there is an alignment in the early stage, in the very earliest stage, between criminal groups and the insurgent group, because criminals tend to have access to muscle in ways that the political insurgents usually don't in the beginning. Phase 2 is this can last a long time. It may last 5 years, 10 years, 50 years. Then phase 2 is usually referred to as the stalemate, and that's when attacks have begun to occur, but the insurgent forces are not superior to the government security forces. They don't have more muscle, but they have the potential to create no-go areas. They have stable base areas. They're beginning to build up a military structure. They've got, it might be a rudimentary military structure, but they've got a fair number of tough guys who are reliable, reasonably well armed, can conduct operations. And again, this might last a long time, but it's when you start to see ambushes on police stations, for example, or attacks on government figures, judges, lawyers, media figures. That mix of, it becomes more physically active.
Yeah.
And the third phase is the usually called the offensive, and that's when the insurgent has built up sufficient material strength while the counterinsurgent or the government has weakened to the extent that the insurgent can contemplate actual peer-on-peer combat with the security forces. So that's the classic Maoist model,
Right.
and more or less tracks what happened in the Chinese Civil War and some other cases of insurgency, which we might give example of.